2 weeks from today, this sanctuary, at least I hope, will be filled. Filled with people, filled with Easter lilies, filled with music, filled with choir, filled with Santa Fe brass, filled with children, filled with everything. All kinds of light and life, all celebrating the resurrection. We'll sing a word that we've not sung for the 6 weeks and 6 Sundays of Lent. The word hallelujah or alleluia. We're going to sing it a whole lot. The whole service will be filled with all of that. We'll conclude with a hallelujah chorus. King of kings and Lord of lords, all celebrating God's resurrection. Today, we also have a story about resurrection. And today, I am very glad you are all here, because you know the truth of resurrection. You know that it's not just Easter glory, but it's a hard journey to get there. I'm talking not only about the resurrection on the other side of this earthly body, I'm talking about the resurrection that's possible in our very human lives this side of things. And so we have this story from the Gospel of John, which lets us know just how hard it is to get to resurrection. Now, the 4 Gospels, including John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when they talk about Jesus' resurrection, they make it all sound pretty easy. 3 days later, either a group of women or one woman goes to the tomb. They wonder, some of them, whether or not how they're going to get the stone rolled away, and lo and behold, they get there. The stone's been rolled away. They see angels, and the linen cloths that the body, the dead body, the stinky dead body had been wrapped in, are laid out neatly and folded. It's all nice and neat. But the Gospel of John tells us the truth about resurrection, that it is a messy, hard business, and that it requires 3 things of us. 3 things that we hear in this story of Jesus resurrecting his best friend Lazarus, his good buddy, the one he could just hang with, who wasn't a disciple, but who with his sisters had opened up his house, had opened up his family circle to just welcome Jesus in. The kind of friend we all need, where we can just hang. That's who's died. That is who is dead. And that's where resurrection begins. That very first hard thing, which is acknowledging the death. Lazarus is dead. Dead as a doornail. Dead as a post. Dead. Not sleeping. Dead. Dead. And there's no way of getting around that fact in this story. And if Jesus wants to just gloss it over, he can't. Because not once, not twice, but 3 times, he's confronted on the way to Lazarus' tomb with people who will tell him, he is dead. He's dead. And that's where that journey has to begin. And it's not where we want to begin it, but it's where it has to begin. Whether we're mourning the death of a loved one, the death of a relationship, the death of a dream, the death of a church. Last Sunday, I stood before my home church of Tempe First Congregational, offering the last sermon for their last service after 125 years. And I realized in the writing of that sermon, which took me longer than just about any other sermon to write, that I couldn't just talk about celebration. I had to talk about the death. I had to treat it like a eulogy with all the things that come with death. And there's a difference, my sisters and brothers, when we don't acknowledge that. A number of years ago, before I came to United, I was involved in a relationship that just kept going south. I mean, it just went south. It went south of the border, it went south of the equator, it went all the way down to Antarctica. And I had a very good, and I kept trying to keep it going. Gave it my best shot. And I had a good friend who finally got tired of listening to me whining all the time and said, Talitha, actually she said, Talitha Jane, there is a difference between resuscitation and resurrection. And you keep trying to do CPR on this dead relationship. It's not working. It's dead. Get a grip and give it up and get a life, girl. Did I want to hear that? Absolutely not. But was my friend spot on? Yes. Because the only way to new life is not trying to keep doing CPR, but acknowledging something has died or someone has died. Lazarus was dead. That's the first thing. The second thing, it is a long, hard journey to acknowledge that. And we hear that in this story as well. We hear it in Martha's and Mary's grief. We hear it in the conversation of the villagers. Well, he healed a blind man. Couldn't he heal his friend? We hear it when Jesus tries to soften the blow with his disciples and tells them, he's sleeping, Lazarus is. But the reality is, he's dead. And Jesus knows that to the very bottom of his soul. And that's why he stands at the grave and weeps. That's why in the nice sort of gussied up language of the gospel, it simply says, he was greatly troubled. Well, you and I know that isn't how it happens. Is that grief is like a tsunami that just keeps blowing us over time and time again. Grief racks our bodies with sorrow. Grief hurts. It hurts like hell. And unless we acknowledge that, if we try to leapfrog over that, you and I both know it will come back and bite us big time. The only way through that valley of the shadows is through the valley of the shadows. And Jesus knew that to his very bones as he stands at the side of his friend's grave and weeps. Deep, racking sobs. And Martha knew it too. Not only the fact that grief makes us sob to the depths of our being, but in the immortal words of the King James Version of this story, she says to Jesus, he's been dead for 4 days. Lord, there will be a stinketh. Death stinks. And that's the journey we have to take. Through that long, hard valley that stinks to high heaven and deepest hell. And the only reason we can do it, my brothers and sisters, is because we know that there is one who's also taken that journey. Before he was the Messiah, before he could shine in glory, he had to be a human being racked by sobs. The only way through it is through it. The only way through death to new life is through death to new life. And finally, a third thing about resurrection. And that is, it's not just something God does. The Gospels would have us believe that at the very end. It's all this almost abracadabra kind of magic. The women go to the tomb, the stone's rolled away. It's all filled with light. But in this story, this human resurrection story, those villagers and Martha and Mary have a job to do in resurrection. Did you hear it in the story? Take away the stone, Jesus says. Do you know how hard it is to raise up that kind of stone so that somebody can be raised back to life? How many people it takes to help us get resurrected? And then when Lazarus comes out of the tomb, what does Jesus say? Unbind him and set him free. He's been wrapped in strips of cloth from head to toe, down to the very tips of his fingers. And no, when he comes out of the tomb, those grave cloths are not folded up neatly and laid inside. He comes out and he's still as bound as he was when they put him in there. And Jesus doesn't just do hocus pocus, all of a sudden Lazarus is there. He says to the people, unbind him and set him free. Which means you got to get close enough to smell death. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to do a job. And that is our job, brothers and sisters, to unbind the ways of death of this world. And sometimes we do it when we walk through the valleys of the shadows with beloved friends or family. Sometimes we do it with people we don't know in the life of this congregation, because that's our job if they're going to make it to resurrection on the other side of the death they've known. And this gospel also asks us, commands us, to unbind the ways of death of this world, to unbind the ways of oppression and of poverty, to make sure that our young people go on a border immersion trip to learn about what prejudice and racism do to the hearts of people, to the lives of people, so that they can unbind that prejudice and that racism. Our faith asks us to unbind creation from the ways in which we abuse God's world, God's earth. Unbind for new life. Our faith asks us to unbind this world from the ways of violence and of death and its hard work. But that's what this gospel reminds us and tells us, that resurrection is not just something God does, but that God depends on you and me and this church and people of faith everywhere to roll away the stone and to unbind this world from ways of death. So this is not the sermon you'll hear in 2 weeks, so I do hope you'll come back on Easter Sunday. But I am very glad you were here today, because you know the hard work of resurrection. You know that we need to come together with song and prayer and story from ancient past to support one another in this hard work of acknowledging death and its devilish ways. This hard work of taking the journey through it to get to new life. And this hard work of unbinding ourselves, unbinding those whom we love, those with whom we share life in this community, those with whom we share life in this world, unbinding from the bounds of death. It's the only way to get to that new life. And we have one who shows us the way. Thanks be to God.